Okay, can everybody see that? So, yes, so in a way, this whole training, I think, focuses on two of the big early questions, which is how much money and who controls it. And so Keith has talked a little bit about the budgeting, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the control and who's controlling it. So it may seem that, well, to put it another way, self-directed support really has emerged, as Keith said earlier, around making sure that everybody can have the right to control their support. And the challenge, therefore, is making sure it includes people who even need support with decision-making and control. So what I'm going to talk about is help with decisions, the idea of supported decision-making, the idea of person-centered planning, how we get support to help us plan, and some of the debates and practicalities. And I'll try to be really quick to maximize our chance for talking more. Here's I've snuck one of Esther's pictures into this. So yeah, decisions. Actually, what's interesting, I think, is it's best if you can think about all of this as being universal. So even though some people need help, more help with decisions, actually, I think it's quite useful to remember we all need help with decisions. We all make decisions in a social context. And so the problems we're trying to solve are multiple. We're trying to make sure that we've worked out who has the authority to make a decision. But we're also trying to explore, in a way, the deeper purpose of the decisions. So it isn't just about having control, it's about having real control that leads to good outcomes, because it's really thinking about what the real purpose of life is. It's also about having good information. There's no point having control if you don't have any information about what's possible. And it's also about having help with decisions, which all of us have all the time, even if we don't think about it. And sometimes it's about risks and balance and working out how to go through tricky parts of life. Now this is a very boring looking slide. This is my only slide full of words, and I will try and talk them through, but this was a very important set of principles, and I've taken this from the guide that I'm currently writing for the UNIC project. So this is, at the moment, the draft guidance that we'll be publishing to all European countries. And what we're saying is that the Human Rights Convention for Persons with Disabilities should guide us. And if we listen to what human rights and disability rights tell us, then the first thing is that we should assume that the person does have capacity to make their own decisions. But if we think that that person actually, if they made those decisions without assistance, without support, they would start to cause harm to themselves, then that's a reason to put in other mechanisms. So we do have to start thinking, well, seriously, Simon needs extra assistance. What does that assistance look like? The second principle is that just because I need assistance with some questions, maybe I'm not very good with my car or my house or something, I need help with those things, doesn't mean that all decisions should be taken away. I think the recent change in the law in Spain, for instance, is an example of how we can see the human rights impact is starting to create space for people to say, no, let's remember that people have the right to relationships, to vote. Just because I have an intellectual disability or because I have dementia doesn't mean all of my rights of control have disappeared. The third principle is the right to select my agent. So if I need assistance, and we agree I need assistance, and it's assistance around some area, then ideally I should pick who that person is who selects me. It might be, I might say my wife, somebody else might say their mother, their brother, a friend, a neighbor. It's for the person to decide. Again, unless there's some real problem that we can see where we might say, no, we don't accept that person because we've got good reason to believe that would be a bad decision. And certainly that person must be able to do the job of supporting the person, must be able to be a suitable agent for the person. They must have the time and the information and the will to do it. They must want to do it. The fifth principle is that the person should do it, if they're making decisions kind of for or with the person, they should make those decisions from the person's point of view and think about what that person themselves would choose, not what I would choose for them, but what they would choose for themselves. The sixth principle is that people should be still involved in any decision making. Even if they have an agent to make decisions, then they should still be involved. And the seventh principle is that any arrangement that's agreed needs to be reviewed because things can change and evolve. So I'm going to give some practical, so these kind of 7 principles was one of the things that we published very early on when we were promoting self-directed support, was to say, these are the principles that we should apply. So that means that everybody can be in control, because really we've got different ways of organizing support. In fact, have I got, I'll jump to this slide. So here I've used the Finnish slide. Somebody asked about the 4 options in Scotland. This is not quite the same. These are more looking at it in a different types of support. So the person can be in control themselves. They could have family that could take control of a budget. They could have peers that would take control of a budget. They could have somebody in the community who could take control of the budget. Services could take control of the budget, or the government, social work, the system could take control of the budget. So that's one way of looking at. So that covers all the options, and self-directed support is meant to work for everybody. So the budget you need to have options that work for everybody in every situation imaginable. So although we often sometimes talk about the person being in control, actually self-directed support can include all of these different options. So I thought I'd just share 4 stories quickly where I think control was managed differently. So Patrick is someone with very complex intellectual impairments, with autism. He had challenging behavior. Now, when we got Patrick out of the hospital to live in his own home, we wanted to buy Patrick a house. And so we had to set up what in Scottish law was a trust. And so we had a group of people come together to form a legal body that could buy the house. Now, also, I made a mistake. So initially I said, well, why we could also use this trust to employ the staff to support Patrick. But actually that wasn't a sensible idea, because the mum and the dad were divorced. They came into conflict. Supporting Patrick was really too complicated for them. And so we took control away from the family about those decisions. We still involved family and we involved Patrick, but actually I employed somebody on this picture, Doreen, to manage the staff team. Now, that was so that might not seem like self-directed support, but it was about creating the ideal support for Patrick, and it was my job to do that. So it wasn't, if it's okay to say, oh, the person's in control or the family's in control, but this is an example of a situation where if we had got the support wrong, the outcomes for Patrick would be disastrous. He would end up hurting people. He would end up being put either into another institution or into some kind of prison. So we really needed to design the support correctly, and we really need to manage the support correctly. This is still self-directed support. Everything is designed around Patrick. The staff are selected for Patrick and with Patrick. The flatmates were selected for Patrick. The family were involved in all of the decisions. But the ultimate control here actually lay with the service provider. So in terms of my little model, this is an example of kind of number 5, where the service is actually making the decisions. This is a different example, and actually this is the example I mentioned earlier of Helen. Now, this is an example where Helen actually selected her mother to manage her staff. So Helen did not take direct control, but she selected her mother to act as her agent. She also said, I want you to come back and review this situation because she had a brain injury. She hoped she would recover capacity and she would be able to take more control of her support. So this is that 7th principle, that things don't stay the same. You've got to create a way in which you can review things. This is an example of where actually the family did take control. And in fact, Billy and Mary, who were Stephen's mother and father, employed Stephen's brother, Gary, to control the service. So it was a very family-controlled service, which works very, very well still today. So here the social worker gave the family the budget, and the family developed the plan, and the family organized the support, and oversaw Stephen again returning from an institution to his own home in a village next to his, close to where his family lived, and the support was all designed by the family. This is another family-based support, but here was interesting. This is a good example of upfront budgeting. Doreen was going to a respite service. That means that basically she didn't get very much support. Mary was her mother. Doreen was sent to the respite service. Doreen didn't like the respite service. So we said, well, what about if we gave you the budget for the respite service instead? So this is money that's already being spent, but it's being spent on this service. Instead, you have the money and you think about what you want. In this situation, interestingly, Mary said, I don't know what I want. I don't have any ideas about how to do anything differently. And so what was very important here was that Mary, with a little bit of help from my friend Suzanne, just invited her friends to come round, her family and friends to come round the house for tea. And the whole family together developed the plan. And they came up with all sorts of great ideas how to spend £3,000. And again, this goes to the point from Italy. The resources here were not so much the money. The resources here were really the family, the love that was already there. And lots of the family said, you know, you should have asked us for help before. We would have loved to have helped you. So the money just made it a little bit easier. Knowing that the money was there made things a little bit easier. The actual support really came from family and friends. So, these principles, I think, are quite strong, and they allow control to be designed, engineered, so that everybody can be in control, even in quite complicated situations. And this means having different arrangements for managing the actual budget. So you do need to have different arrangements. You know, it's not always going to be money going to the person. Sometimes the money needs to go to different people so that they manage the budget for the person. Then we go to a deeper question, really. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? So again, sorry, these are Esther's drawings based on the keys to citizenship model. But this is really saying, you know, if we think about human life, then one of the best things we can do is start to think of ourselves as citizens. And this is a quote on the left, is from John O'Brien. Citizens are people who can say, I belong to this place and its people, and I am willing to act from responsibility for my belonging. People with disabilities are amongst those who are vulnerable to social exclusion, being pushed to the edges of society and deprived of what they require to participate actively. Citizenship creates a framework for understanding what it is that we're really trying to do when we become allies with people with disabilities who are seeking a life that makes sense. And the keys to citizenship model starts to say, well, what does a good life look like? It's about having a sense of purpose. I'm on this planet for this reason. It's about having freedom to do the things that are important to you. It's about having enough money so that you've got enough independence to pursue your plans and dreams. It's about getting help from other people because nobody lives alone. It's about having a home that's yours. It's about contributing to the life of the community, and it's about love. So self-directed support is really meant to support citizenship in this sense. That's its purpose, its true purpose. And person-centered thinking or planning, which has been led by people like John O'Brien and Beth Mount, I think is very important to all of this. So citizenship is related to the three ideals of democracy that are a core of person-centered work. All people are created equal. We are entitled to reach for our higher purpose. And there must be equal opportunities to do so, not just to receive, but to give back. And pursuing these ideals strengthens society and enriches culture for all of us. So this again goes to the point that was made from the Italian group, that the money in the old system, really the money dictates how people live too often for a lot of people. The money goes into services and then people are put into those services and they have very little control. What we're trying to do is put that money into people's lives so that people can build relationships, join community, use all of their resources and use all of their gifts in a way that makes them stronger and stronger citizens. So I'm going to skip some of these things. So when we're thinking about how we support people to plan, we have to think about all these different things that everybody in life needs. We all need good information. We all need help and advice from our friends and our peers. We all need community supports and services and advice. And what we've been trying to argue really is that the best kind of support might look something like this, that we don't plan for people. We don't take control of the planning process, but we allow people to plan for themselves. So we do that when we give people clear information about their budget. We do that when we give people useful information about what's possible and what's available. We do that when we connect people to their peers. We do that when we connect people to community organizations and when we recommend appropriate support. But it's for people themselves to set their own direction. One of the things, actually, this is an example of where we had to work around things, and I'm not quite sure. I have apologized in writing for support planning becoming a new thing. And maybe people want to ask a little bit more about this later. But when we started this process in Scotland, one of the laws was that everybody needed a care plan. And then the care plan needed to come from the social worker. So this was what part of the law. So what I proposed was that we said, well, that's okay then. What if the person or the family created a support plan and then they gave it to the social worker, and the social worker could either suggest changes or agree it. But when they agreed it, then it became a care plan. So in other words, just because the law says a social worker must produce a care plan doesn't mean the social worker cannot work with the person and the family and give them much more control. So the word support plan was really a kind of a way of working around the need for a officially approved care plan. I don't know how you all feel. Maybe it's only in the UK that we feel comfortable with bending the rules like this. But this is an example of we were just being creative with the rules. So we were still following the law, but we were doing it in a very different way to the way the law had been written. And so what we said to families is, here's your budget, and we need you to write a support plan. And if you're writing a support plan, these are some of the questions you need to cover. Who is the person? Who are you? What are your goals? How are you staying safe? What support are you organising? How are you managing that support? How are you staying in control of it? And how much will it all cost? I'm going to skip over that and that. We could go back to that if you like. I think the most important thing to remember is this is from our friend Heather Simmons, who's a Scottish thinker and practitioner. And she just tries to remind us this, that the most important thing in all of this talk, we can get lost in all the details, budgeting, planning, and everything. But the most important thing are the values. Is this about justice, human rights, citizenship for all? If it is, then we're doing the right kind of thing. That's what's got to inform our work. We can then work out how to behave better, to respect what people are saying and doing, and be follow up on our promises, as Heather puts it. And then on top of that, then there are rules and systems that we can develop that make it easier. Managing budgets, planning, support planning, budget setting, all of these things that we've talked about. But in the end, in your context, whether that be Italy, Spain, or Greece, you know, it's the values that should be our foundation. Okay. I don't know if that's enough that's trying to help us think about how we help people plan. So how we stop planning for people and how we help people plan. And it's about giving people good information and opportunity and the power to do that in a way that's respectful, but also maybe kind of ordinary. Thinking about all of us need help. So let's not create a special way of doing this. Let's try and create an open approach that everybody can use and that can be We can have a flexible approach to how planning works. It's not a new technology for a strange people. It's something all of us do all the time. We look at our lives, we look at the resources we have, and we try and find better solutions. Okay, what's next?